The Western Front was probably the great battlefield of the First World War. The war in Europe evolved around two fronts. The Eastern Front, where Germany and Austria fought the Russians, and the Western Front, where the Germans and Austrians fought the French and the Belgians and the forces of the British Empire, that of course included Australia. The title of this exhibition is The Salient. Salient is a military term. It refers to a bulge in the line, but the most significant and probably the bloodiest was the salient that was around Ypres in Belgium, with Ypres at the centre of it and a ring of hills occupied by the Germans. That meant that the men inside the salient were surrounded on three sides. It made it a very bloody place to live and die.
I made a whole lot of little gouaches, watercolours, while I was there, about what appears to be pretty landscape. As you get out of the towns, you're driving through fairly flattish but gently rolling landscape with fluoro yellow flowers with that wild rape and various other crops all growing. It's all beautiful looking with big clouds rolling over the top. But you're so conscious that in all these places they're still finding bodies, and that these were places of the most horrific atrocities, and they're still constantly finding bits. I mean, they're bodies, but also bits of shrapnel, bits of everything. It's very present, and it's far more so than I thought.
Probably the one kind of theme I was thinking about before I went that I thought I'd be able to kind of get my teeth into, which was the idea of the tunnels. They tried to tunnel in under each other, which I think is one of the most horrifying kind of thoughts of being trapped inside a tunnel. And I'd heard these Arras tunnels were much bigger. A lot of people could fit in them. So there was a sense of, there wasn't such a horrible sense of claustrophobia. And I had heard about them and was really interested to see them. So it was the one theme I probably thought that, yeah, I can probably deal with that. You know, fields, no, that's going to be hard. But tunnels, yeah, I can do tunnels.
I started working on these paintings, just three particular areas where my grandfather's older brother fought and died. So this area here is called Corby, and according to his war service records, he did actually fight here in this particular area. The record that the Red Cross have is that he was shot through the side and asked for water. He was 20 years old. They took records when people fell, believe it or not, even though there would have been hundreds when the battle settled down or at nightfall, and they marked where people fell, because when it started up again, either in the night or the next day, because there was this constant bombardment, the bodies would disappear and end up buried in mud and just end up being deeper and deeper into the soil. So there was no chance of recovery. So according to the Red Cross record, they marked where he fell, and so that's where I went and I painted, for probably most of the 2 weeks.
Men couldn't dig trenches without them filling up with water. Underground dugouts constantly had to be pumped. So soldiers during the fighting in the Ypres salient were usually doing it ankle deep, knee deep, sometimes waist deep in water. And usually when we say water, it meant mud. Less than 20% of those who died in the Ypres salient have known graves because the mud swallowed them.
A lot of the artists in this exhibition would rather work directly from the motif outside, directly out in the landscape. I don't want to do that. I actually want to paint more about how it felt. So what I did was, although I did a few sketches, I mostly went around in the morning. We drove around and we looked at various sites, and we had explained to us what happened there, and We looked at it, took photographs and so on. And then what I mostly did was I came back and I worked in the hotel room making small gouaches from memory, because I actually didn't want a topographical image. I wanted to try, without being corny, I wanted to try and show, particularly with those little gouaches, what looks like a beautiful landscape with pretty fields and so on, but to have a feeling of disquiet, so you know that it's not that. It really was the site of something terrible that's still resonant.
What I ultimately ended up painting was, I think, not very much to do with the landscape in the end. I didn't really use the landscape in the same way as I did in Gallipoli. In Gallipoli, I had a kind of a stage set of which to kind of, you know, put all these figures doing things with the beautiful Sphinx in behind and the Aegean Sea. Whereas in France and Belgium, there wasn't any of that. And I think in a way it was quite good. It meant that the paintings became much more just about the physicality of dirt and mud and fire and smoke and yeah, just a much more primal experience, I think.